I was actually approached by the World Bank to be part of this core team that was looking to help the Kenyan government and under the guidance of the PS to help him achieve this vision of launching an open data portal. And so when that opportunity came, knowing the potential and the power of what open data can do to economies and how they can change ecosystems in countries, it was too good an opportunity to pass over. Not only that, but it would mean that Kenya would be one of the first countries in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, and one of a handful of countries in the world to open up its data. Now, this coming right after the promulgation of the new constitution would just, set a precedent for the country. A lot of, especially after the post-election violence, a lot of governments, Western governments especially, were not really sure that the country was serious, even with the new constitution. So I think this was going to be a landmark occasion for the country, and it was too good an opportunity to pass over.
When you got involved, do you remember the sequence of events? What do you remember?
Yeah, it was actually a strange sequence of events. Sometimes they say things are just meant to happen, and people come into your lives at the right time. I have normally played more of a bridging role and a role of a catalyst, and so I had been having this discussion of open data, knowing that for the last 3 years there was actually an open data site in Kenya. There was nothing on it apart from a couple of PDF financial documents and the budget speech. But I had been having this discussion with Kaushal Bhalla, who works out of the World Bank in DC, and he had started educating me on what open data can do. And so I happened to meet with Ali Mwalji, who at the time who is the manager of the Innovation Practice Division at the World Bank in DC, and we just had a casual chat about open data, and I gave him my thoughts about how an open data portal could be launched here in Kenya, and invited me here to the World Bank local office. I met with Christopher Finch, who became instrumental as well as part of that core team, and we started having a number of discussions. We then started having discussions with the PS, who really wanted to get this portal launched but didn't know how to. And so I was sort of tasked with the role of beginning to be the catalyst and bringing these people together. And I recall when the momentum actually started picking up, the same individual, Kaushal, who had come down to do some mapping work, we decided to have a meeting with the PS. And I said, we need to get the right people together in the room, and we need to get the right entities coming in at the right time. Normally what happens is when you bring everybody together, it sometimes doesn't work out. You know how they say, too many cooks spoil the broth. And so I reached out to individuals that I thought would be able to push the process forward. I reached out to Al Kags, who had played an instrumental role in the ICT development in this country, had worked for the Ministry of Information and Communication, the ICT board, and there were some gray areas around government that we didn't know how to negotiate or help the PS negotiate, and he seemed the right person. And so we started having a number of meetings with the PS. So I recall a meeting with myself and Al Kags and Christopher Finch and Tracy Lane, showing him some mock-ups of what we could do. And at that time, we had no data. We had the Kenya Bureau of Statistics. It was very difficult to get data from them. It was very difficult to get census data from them. I remember the PS saying, I have the census data, and he produced these large 7 books. So it was quite a process. But I also recall that we were having these meetings, and the PS's concern was, it's great to have all these ideas, but how do we push this initiative forward? And so these meetings continued, and one fine day I got a call saying that the PS has invited us to his office. Just prior to that, we had visited Athman Mohammed, who had just won the Apps for Development competition, and that's where I knew him. And we said, why don't we show the PS what a site looks like? And so we tasked him to come up with a mock-up of what an open data site would look like. And actually he managed to do that in a couple of weeks. And before the PS could actually see that, we got called into his office, and that was myself and Chris and Tracy and Paul Kukubo of the ICT board. And I remember sitting there and the PS saying, okay, so we're ready to launch. The president has given his go-ahead. And we looked at each other and said, go ahead for what? And he said, well, the open data. And we said, well, that's like in 6 weeks' time. And he said, yes, get it done. And so all of a sudden, from having no direct vision of whether this site was going to happen, whether Kenya was going to accept being part of the open data community, all of a sudden we were tasked with getting a site launched. And so a number of discussions happened. How do we go about this? What is it going to cost? Do we use local developers? And the fact of the matter was, we just couldn't. So we had to look for an out-of-box solution. And I remember leaving the meeting and turning to Chris saying, we need the right players to come into this really, really quickly. And then we need to, set up the right mechanisms in place. And I said, let me get in touch with Al, and let me get in touch with Athman, and let's get a task force meeting happening straight away. And I think that was the first time the ICT board had also come in, and the ICT board is really good at mobilizing the right people as well. And so we went about having our first task force meeting. I believe that Socrata was the platform that was recommended by the World Bank in DC. They were actually using that platform for their own data portal. It was an out-of-box solution. There was a bit of resistance from local developers who said that they could come up with a solution, but we couldn't take that chance. I mean, this was a presidential directive. And in hindsight, that was the right decision. I think that even now it's a bit sad because developers could actually 6 months down the line proved the government wrong, and unfortunately they haven't. And so we started having these task force meetings, and we basically divided people into different tasks. We had a technical task force, we had a data task force, we also had a legal task force, we had a task force that was just going to handle the actual launch, which was quite hilarious with some of the things that they were asking for. And so, this process continued, long sleepless nights for the 3-4 weeks. Sometimes, we wouldn't even see our families. A lot of pro bono work, a lot of volunteer work, but this was good for the country. And, it then led up to the particular day. We had done all this hard work. We had met with the presidential security. We had met with presidential protocol. We had even chosen what kind of traditional dances we wanted, what songs we wanted. We had been told what roses or flowers can be used and not used. And then the PS walked in, and he wasn't looking his cheerful, jolly self. The PS has a great sense of humor, and he says, he sat there for a while listening to everything that was happening. We actually demonstrated some data visualizations for him, and he sort of dropped a bombshell. And he said, you know, thank you for all your hard work, but it looks like, you know, this event may not happen. The president has asked to see us. I'm not saying that it's not happening right now, but people around the president have said, you know, what is this open data thing? You know, are you opening up state secrets? Don't you realize that there's just been a WikiLeaks, and this is another WikiLeaks? And so he says, you know, we have to go and convince him. And so the PS, the minister, Paul Kubo from the ICT board, and then Athman and Dennis Gikunda was from Google, who had done some of these visualizations, you know, went the next day. And I remember I was camped at the ICT board that whole week trying to help with the preparations. And I think I probably had bitten off all my nails, just, you know, wondering what's happening. And, you know, normally, you know, the PS said that these meetings take about half an hour, 40 minutes, and they were in there for 2 hours. So there was a lot of anxiety, you know, is this happening? We didn't know what was happening. We were just carrying on as normal, doing preparations, and we had a backup plan, and we were told, you know, if it's a no, then we'll just go and showcase technology, right? And obviously the president will not come. The interesting thing was, and I guess this also shows you where the country has come from, is that at the launch, or before the launch actually, we had over 1,700 people confirming that they were going to attend. And all these confirmations were done online, right? So it just shows you where we've come from. You wouldn't have expected this. And so it was with great relief when the PS called and said, it's a go. You know, I would have loved to be a fly on the wall to see what the president was shown, or what the president actually said. But I believe that the case that was put forward by the PS was nothing about transparency or governance. It was all about, you know, what this can do for the youth, opening up this data, what it can do for the economy. Government themselves would be able to better understand how to govern citizens and provide services for citizens. The power of open data is such that, you know, businesses, individuals, developers can actually add to the data, or can actually take that data and produce economic value from it, right? It's not just about governance and transparency. It allows citizens a platform to engage with government. It allows governments a platform to engage with citizens better. But I think for me, the biggest value of open data is that it allows citizens to make better informed decisions about their livelihoods. You know, if, for example, I want to put my child in school, I now have the ability to go and see where those schools are, what the teacher-pupil ratio of those schools are, you know, what the exam results of those schools are, so that I can get the best for my child. And as a government, I can know, why am I spending so much on a school that's not producing and so little on another school that is, right? Informed decision, and that's the power of open data. The launch happened on July the 8th, and I remember after making the final preparations the night before, you know, trying to make sure that things like bandwidth were up, just making sure that, you know, people were going through their presentations. I remember waking up very early in the morning, and, you know, July is a winter sort of month in Kenya, and on that day it was surreal because there was not a cloud in the sky. And I remember driving down the highway, and the sun was coming up, and it was about, you know, 6:45 in the morning, and I thought, you know, this is a new dawn, this is a new beginning, and this is going to be a great day. And I remember so many things about that day. I remember the people. My God, there were like, you know, over 3,000 people I remember the entertainment. The president was a bit late. You know, pleasantly surprised that they actually, you know, came up with an open data song, which just got the entire crowd, you know, moving and shaking. And I remember the PS's speeches, and I remember the PS getting up and, you know, talking passionately about how he made a promise a month ago to the youth, to the developers of the country, and he made that promise at the iHub, where he was actually put on the spot, where the developer said, you know, we can't build applications if we don't have access to data. And he says, you know, I will give you this data within a month. And he delivered that promise. So there was a great sense of pride in the way he was speaking. I remember that that evening when I switched on my computer and I just searched, you know, everything from the World Bank site, which gets a lot of hits, to global international media. All eyes were just on Kenya. You know, it got to a stage where even Twitter, Kenya was a trending topic on Twitter. So it was a pretty big deal. And you know, looking back, it wasn't actually 6 weeks. It was more like 3 weeks before we actually got ourselves organized and did this. And I think that was a remarkable achievement. And you know, looking back, it was, you know, a sigh of relief that we actually pulled it off in the time frame that we pulled it off. From the positive side, because we had to get this portal up in the time frame that we did a commendable job. But there was still a lot of work that we could have done with the portal. There was probably various systems that we would have put into place. So, you know, it would have been wise to put in an outreach program right after. But you've also got to look at things like resources. And this is an expensive process. On the positive side, since then, in early December, we now have an actually brand new revamped site, which is, you know, can be searched even better, has better visualizations, more information to citizens or data users. What we've seen is an upsurge of data requests and also an upsurge of traffic. But I would have liked to see it much better. The sad thing for me is that, you know, the PS actually stuck his neck out to do this for the developers, and yet right now there haven't been too many applications that have been used or have used the data from the open data side. And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that, you know, there hasn't really been an outreach program, which is now beginning to come in place, and you know, we're getting people like media and civil society and the corporates now educated on you know, the power of this data and what it can do for them. You know, from a corporate standpoint of view, you always want a business continuity sort of angle, and you know, like I said, open data has the ability to actually change ecosystems. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of outreach. There's also a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of gathering more data. CSOs out there have so much data, so, you know, how do you bridge that gap, and how do you integrate all the data that they have? So I think there's still a long way to go, but we've made a start.